Hey everyone, welcome back to bageltcg. Today I'm going to be doing predictions and a meta tier list for the World Championship. It's coming up in just a few days here. I haven't made a video in quite a while. I have moved to a second new apartment here in Amsterdam after coming over from the States, and I am preparing a lot for Worlds. So hoping to do pretty good this time. I've gotten 40th at the last Pro Tour and Worlds, so I've got a bit of a curse with that number. So hoping to at least break into top 32 or maybe do better. But I'm back, and let's break down the meta. I'm gonna kind of do both. I'm gonna predict what I think is gonna win and top eight the World Championship, but I'll do that while making this tier list and talking about it. So a lot has changed since my last tier list video. Lexi was the only hero in S tier, which I think makes sense. She's living legend now. I don't think too many people would have disagreed with that then. And Dromai and Icelander were the only two heroes in A tier, and Bright Lights didn't exist yet. So I think I had made it as a predicted Bright Lights tier list, so I had the Bright Lights heroes in there. But I had them pretty low. I had Dash IO and Max in C tier. I had regular Dash in B tier, and then I had Teklo down in D tier. I think some of those are correct, and obviously Dash IO is quite wrong. Definitely not C tier. So that was probably the biggest miss for my call there. I think all of the others are fairly close, but the Dash IO call was definitely quite wrong. But let's hop into this tier list. I think we should start at the bottom and then work up to what the best decks are. So I think the bottom is D tier is basically decks that I would almost never recommend bringing. You have to either have a really solid plan to target the best decks that is maybe like a hidden tech that nobody else knows about. You have to just be playing for fun. You really enjoy the deck, that's fine. Or you have to just be a master at it and like I said, you really know how to beat the best decks. You have a lot of practice, but I think for the average 99% of players, I wouldn't recommend if you're trying to win a major event picking up a D tier hero. So I think a lot of these heroes have been kind of stuck in D tier for a while. We've got Riptide. He just doesn't have enough damage to kill anyone, and because he's a ranger, he can't fatigue either that well because he doesn't have a good weapon. We have Prism. The new Prism doesn't really have enough life to work with, and because she doesn't have the really good original Luminaris weapon, she has this new version of Luminaris. She can't really do the aura plan as well either. She has to play Iris, and so she's just a bit too squishy to set up all her auras at the moment. We have Arachne. He really doesn't have enough disruption compared to Azuri, who is the much better assassin. If you wanted to play assassin, I would just play Azuri most of the time. They're very similar. Similarly to Riptide, I would just play Azalea, and Prism, you could play Dromai. None of them are exactly the same, but there are better versions of at least the same class for all these heroes. But yeah, Arachne just is another really slow deck. A lot of this tier is basically slow decks that don't actually have a good payoff for being slow. Like if you're a slow deck, sometimes that's okay, but after you have gone to 10 life and the aggro deck's beating you down, you need to have some way to turn the game around, and a lot of these decks don't have that way to turn it around yet. We have Vincent and Viserai. The Rune Blades lost the really good weapon of Rosetta Thorn. They are kind of just the weak aggro decks right now. These aren't slow decks. Well, actually, Vincent's a little slow. But these are kind of just aggro decks that aren't really fast enough. Aggro decks need to have a really strong weapon. That's a part of being an aggro deck. It's one of the ways you beat fatigue. It's one of the ways you deal a lot of damage. And these aggro decks are just not going to get there. And I unfortunately think the Rune Blades aren't in a great spot right now. And then Teklevossen, I think he does have a really good payoff. His demi hero is quite strong, but he's just too slow. Like usually you will die before you get to your demi hero or be almost dead. So I don't think he's really going to get there. I do think he has a really good matchup into Bravo, which is a little unfortunate for Bravo, but you probably won't see a Teklevossen. And then last time, the hero that was in this tier, there's one hero that I had in D tier that is not in there anymore, is Reinar. Reinar just had a really good performance at the last Battle Hardened, put two Reinars, and I think he's a lot better position now. One of his worst matchups, period, was Lexi, and I think the meta's transitioned a lot to make Reinar more playable, but we'll get there when we get there, because I don't think he's in C tier either, actually. C tier are heroes that I think could possibly sneak a single hero into the top 8. So one hero could make it into the top 8 with C tier, but once again, you have to really know the hero super well. You have to have a really solid plan into the top decks. And I still wouldn't recommend most people pick up a C tier hero. And I don't think you're going to do great if you're just picking them up for the first time for a major event. But I do think they could sneak in if you have a really good meta call on the weekend. So C tier heroes, I'm actually going to put Azuri in there. Azuri kind of preyed on Lexi. That matchup was really almost unwinnable for Lexi. But with Lexi gone, the heroes that have moved into fill the S and A tier are pretty hard for Azuri to beat. So I think Azuri drops quite a lot. I would have put Azuri in maybe A tier at some point in the last meta, but now I just don't think it's quite there. I think both of the warriors are probably down here in C tier. I think some people that are really good with warrior, like uh, Josh Lau. I hope I'm getting the name right. I'm kind of forgetting right now, but he's really good at warrior. I'm sorry I forgot your name wrong, but it's a bit late. If you're really good at warrior, I think you can still top 8. I think this, like I said, these heroes could potentially make it, but I think warrior right now is pretty bad into a lot of the decks. And so you have to have a good game plan or just like perfect play, like just not make any mistakes to really be able to do well with the Warriors. They're just not quite there. I think Heavy Hitters is a new set coming out. The next set, I think in January or February next year, and it has Warrior support. So I'm hoping, I think that will at least be good support for Dorinthia. There's probably a new Warrior that might be good too. So I think Warrior will get a buff there, but right now it's just not quite strong enough. We've got Kano in this tier as well. Kano is in an okay spot, but it's just Kano. 30 life is kind of low. And yeah, Dromai is pretty popular, which is not the easiest matchup for Kano. Any number of Oasis Respites are going to kill Kano, and I think some of the more played decks are actually running it right now, like Turtle Dash and Dromai both often run Oasis, and so I wouldn't really want to pick Kano right now, and he's also not amazing into mech decks. They can pack AB3 pretty well and then kill him fast with a bunch of extra resources floating because of Teklo Core. Obviously, I'm talking about Dash here specifically, but not in the best spot. And then I have Levia here as well. Levia, she's actually quite strong, but I think she's a little too inconsistent. I think if Levia was a bit more inconsistent, she would be in B or maybe even A tier. But the current builds, unless she's optimized a bit more, just don't happen to be consistent enough to get there as much as you'd really want to get there. So I will put her in B tier. I do think if the builds were optimized to the point where she could be more consistent, if that's possible, like I said, she could be higher. Or if she gets a little more support. But as it is, I think she can do really powerful things, but I don't think she can do them often enough to make her a viable hero. I'm still kind of flip flopping if I think the ninjas are in C tier or B tier. I think I'll put the ninjas in B tier here and just say, yeah, this is like in the middle, maybe low B tier. I think the ninjas are in a decent spot. People often think they have a good matchup into Dromai, who's kind of the de facto best deck of the format. We'll obviously talk about that a bit more. I think they have an okay matchup into Dromai. She gets Tumulti out a lot easier now with her new tome. And when she destroys the mask, the matchup becomes almost Dromai favored. So I don't think it's actually like really amazing for ninjas. And then you'll see the other best decks I think are Icelander, Bravo, and both of those are pretty hard for Ninja, especially Icelander. And I also think Azalea is quite good. So basically all the best decks are like maybe at best 55% win rate for Ninja, and usually maybe 50% or worse. So don't think they're exactly where you want to be with aggro right now. I think the newest heroes that just got a ton of support are actually where you want to be with aggro. So I think Max is the new mech hero. I think he's actually not too bad. All of the mechs except for Teklevasan are pretty good now. They got quite a bit of support. Max in particular is a bit weird because you play the construct usually, and that makes it so he's not as good of an aggro deck, but a lot better into slow decks. So he's really strong into Bravo, for example. Bravo usually often struggles to kill him before he sets up the construct, and then he can do a high octane combo turn just to destroy Bravo with the construct. So he has some good matchups into some of the better decks, but he is a little slow, and he does struggle into other aggro decks actually. So he's in a bit of a weird spot. I don't think he's quite as good as the other mech heroes that we'll get to, but I do think he's solid. Like, he's definitely not a bad hero. I guess I should say for B tier, um, yeah, I guess B tier are heroes that you're taking to target specifically one of the S or A tier decks, probably an S tier deck, and you're bringing them because you think they're, gonna beat that deck and you're gonna see it often, and you're hoping to maybe dodge one or two bad matchups that are also in the S or A tier. But the hero is strong enough to put one. I'll probably still in B tier, one copy in the top 8. I think this will be where I make my first top 8 call. So I've got 8 slots. I think I'll put Max in there actually as a 1 copy. We saw the Battle Hardened that Bravo is the most played deck. And if he continues to be the most played deck or even the second most played deck, I think Max can prey on that probably as one of the better decks in the format to do so. And I think Max might get there. I think we might I'll say 1 copy of Max in top 8. That'll be, I guess, a bit of a spicy call. I'm also going to put Rhinar. See, I almost want to put Rhinar in A tier right now, which is crazy because he was in D tier last meta. But his Lexi matchup was just so unwinnable that it was crazy. But I think he's up in B tier, maybe A tier now. I'll say high B tier for him. You can probably tell the tiers aren't in any specific order. But I'll say high B tier now for Rhinar. I mean, Rhinar has a great matchup into... You can probably tell what are the higher tier heroes because they're at the bottom still. Obviously, Lexi is Living Legend. But, the heroes we have to have at the bottom here, Rhinar has a good matchup into a lot of these. Specifically, Dromai, Icelander, and Bravo. I think he has a pretty good matchup into all 3 of those. Intimidate makes it so his Bravo matchup's kind of favored because Bravo can't block as much as he'd like. He has a ton of poppers for Dromai. And then Icelander, he can attack pretty efficiently. He's got 2-card 8s that only cost 2 resources. So he can, pitch a blue, attack for 8, have 1 floating to pay for Arcane. And then he gets kind of 9 value from 2 cards, which is quite strong. So I think he's not even bad in that match either. Also, Intimidate's not bad there. If you can blood option, like a Blizzard or a Channel Leak Frigid, and then you can kind of blow her out. So I think I'd say B tier for Rhinar is pretty fair. He still has some of the inconsistency issues that that Brute has, but I think he can get there. I'll say 1 copy of Rhinar in top 8 as well. So we have two in top 8 now, 1 Max, 1 Rhinar. I'm putting 2 of the B tiers in there, sneaking in. And that's it for B tier. Let's move on to A tier here. So I'm going to start with the mech heroes. I think both dashes are in A tier for pretty different reasons. Dash.io is basically only, at the moment, just being built as a pure aggro deck. But I think she's the highest ceiling pure aggro deck in the format. She can do really busted turns, tons and tons of damage. But I do think she's going to be targeted a little bit after a pretty huge performance 2 weeks ago. People are, she went 14-0, which is incredible. That pilot did amazing. But I think people are really targeting her now, and maybe weren't targeting her as much before, which made it so that performance was possible. Also, she has obviously a little bit of consistency issues, but the damage output she's capable of makes up for that a lot. But yeah, I think she's up there. She has a good matchup into Dromai, who's going to be played a lot. I think she even potentially can be built to have a good matchup into Icelander, because she can get a lot of resources. And then she'll have a good matchup into regular Dash as well. But I think her Azalea and Brava matchups are a little rough. She blocks pretty poorly because she has some okay equipment, but she plays a lot of items, like 13 to 15 items, which all don't block. So often, and she also can't play any defense reactions, right? So, or at least not super well. So all of the dominate on hits from Bravo and Azalea are going to get through pretty well. But for the opposite reason, I think OG Dash is good for Turtle Dash reasons. Turtle Dash is obviously the version where you play a bunch of defense reactions, Sigil, Fate Foreseen, Sync, you play Red Unmovables, and you try to set up the full pistol build with 3 Plasma Purifiers, 3 Induction Chambers, and then basically no deck can win from there because you're going to do so much damage every turn. That deck is particularly good into Bravo, and also pretty decent into Azalea as well. So the other half of this meta, she almost always loses to Dromize, although I know they are often built to beat Dromize now by playing a ton of poppers and trying to fatigue like that. And she's going to struggle into Icelander as well, who can set up Frost Hex combo. But I do think the Bravo matchup is kind of for the same reason I put one copy of Max as my guess in top 8. I think OG Dash has a chance as well to be able to just prey on the bunch of Bravos we're going to see. I guess I should say how many of Dashes are going to be in top 8. Should I put any? I almost don't want to put any. I'm going to say, this is another crazy call. No Dashes make top 8. At both of the most recent events, Dashes made top 8. There was like a Turtle Dash in both top 8s at Battlehard and PTI. There was a Dash IO that took you really far. I think Dashes have too much of a target on their back. I'll make, yeah, this top 8 call is going to be super wrong, probably, but we'll say no copies of Dash in the top 8. And then the last hero I'll put in A tier is Bravo. Bravo also has a bit of an inconsistency issue. He can draw all blue hands when he's trying to keep up the pressure and then just completely fumble the tempo of the game. But he's in a pretty decent spot right now. He has a pretty good matchup into Dromai. He has a pretty good matchup into all the mech hero. He's a pretty good matchup into a huge portion of the field. He just gets preyed on by a few specific heroes like Icelander, and then like Max and Turtle Dash. He has some like really unwinnable matchups sometimes. But I think the hero is consistent enough. He has so much armor block now. He's got like 12 armor block plus 3 extra if you're playing shield. So I think he's in a pretty good spot there. But yeah, I think Bravo is just not quite an S tier hero. He's very, very good, but I don't think he's quite that good. I'll say one copy of Bravo. That's going to be me, of course, in top 8. So 1 Bravo, 1 Max, 1 Rhinar. That's what I said, yeah. We got 5 more slots, so it's going to be made up by these heroes. I think the 2 best decks right now are actually Icelander and Azalea. Third best deck is Dromai. I think Icelander and Azalea are both very well positioned. I'll say 2 of each. No, I'll say 1 Azalea. 2 Icelander, 2 Dromai, 1 Azalea. Only because not a lot of people are going to play Azalea, not because she's not really good. So 2 Icelander, 2 Dromai, 1 Azalea, 1 Bravo, 1 Max, 1 Rhinar. Really feel like I should include Dashes in there, but I'm not going to. I don't think they're going to get there. So the reason for this S tier, let's talk about it. Dromai's in an amazing spot. She's got this really powerful new card with Tome. She even has a good way to beat Phantasm-based decks now with the Dust of the Chrome Caverns. She's in a pretty good spot, but she has some weaknesses now that she actually didn't have as much before. Namely, her Icelander matchup got a little bit worse because she has to play so many reds to play the Tome that the Icelander matchup is a bit weaker. So I think maybe one of the Dromais that makes top 8 is going to be full red line with the Tomes, and the other one is actually going to be more of the classic Big Dragon version that plays 9 or 12 blues, because that version has a much better shot into Icelander. So I think maybe one of each will make it in. But I think Icelander has a good matchup into every single deck in this entire meta almost, except for Azalea, I think is like the one bad matchup. I think everything else is maybe no worse than like 50 or 55 chance for Icelander. I think she can win every match pretty consistently, or at least get close to winning it. Except for Azalea, I think it's pretty hard for Icelander to beat. Azalea, Rangers in general are a bit of a weakness for Icelander. Lexi was as well. They can put up these really strong on hits with arrows, often that target Arsenal with Seek and Destroy or Inertia for Azalea. They also get Codexes, which are pretty disruptive for Icelander. They just have so many ways to disrupt Icelander's plan that even if they're not super resource heavy, they don't usually need it. They're usually able to kill Icelander while disrupting her so deeply that she can't do anything. I also think Azalea has a pretty good matchup into everything in this meta except for like a few specific heroes. Like I think her Dromai matchup is maybe about a 50-50 or maybe a little worse. And then I think her Bravo matchup is pretty unfavored because he can, she has kind of the same problem as Dash IO where she doesn't block great and he can disrupt her pretty easily. So I think they're both very good, though. I think Icelander will put 2 copies, 1 Azalea, 2 Dromais. They're all good for different reasons. I think any of them would be a potential to win the event. If I have to call who's going to win the event, I'll say Michael Hamilton on Icelander. We'll say he's going to run it back and take it home to America again. But I think any of them could win it. I do think Icelander and Azalea are the best. I think Dromai is almost A tier. But I think they're both in a good spot. This is kind of where I would put everything right now, though. Yeah, I mean, I think this meta is really great. If you watch my previous tier list video, S tier had 1 hero, Lexi. A tier only had 2 heroes, Icelander and Dromai. And now we've gone from, I kind of consider S and A tier like the best decks. I think they're pretty close usually, so S and A tier are the best decks. We went from like 3 best decks to 6. So the potential decks you could play that are like able to win an event doubled, which is really impressive. We have 1 less hero now in B tier. I think I had 5 before, and now we have 4. But that's still way more decks that are playable overall. I usually don't recommend picking up a C or D tier hero to take to a major event unless you're like super good specialist on that hero. But I think there's a lot of good picks for this meta. I'm going to be playing Bravo because it's the only hero I really know how to play well enough, I think, to be able to have a chance to win every game. I think that's really important in Flesh and Blood. If you don't know the hero well enough that you think you could possibly win every game, then it's not really worth playing them at a major event. If you're picking up Dash.io but you don't know every matchup inside and out, there's not great odds. There's odds you're gonna play a matchup and not actually know what to do and do multiple mistakes because you're not exactly sure how to do that matchup. So yeah, that's the tier list. A bit of a long video. I went a little more into detail this video. I'm happy to be back. I hope you guys liked this video. Leave some comments with your top 8 predictions. If you've made it this far, say hey in the comments and leave your top 8 predictions in the comments, what you think is going to show up, even what you think is going to win the event, or even who you think is going to win the event. I would love to see all your comments below, and also lets me know you have an adult attention span and got to the end here. So thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.